Welcome to Pensar Basketball Live, and today we are talking about the Toronto Raptors and the job that new head coach, Darko Rajakovic is doing. Thank you guys for all of these comments right here. Road to 7,000 subscribers, less than 30 away. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's see if we can get it done on this live. Make sure to like this video on your way in if you like Raptors content, if you like post-game shows. This is almost every single night, the most watched post-game show on the Toronto Raptors. But today is not a post-game show because the Toronto Raptors are not playing today. I thought it would be as good a day as any to discuss the elephant in the room. Does the guy know how to coach? He makes a lot of mistakes. Every first-time coach does, of course. Give me one sec here. Sip on this water. But today we're going to do a very deep dive into the stats. We're going to look at how the Raptors have been doing in this, iteration of the Toronto Raptors, how they were doing last year under Nick Nurse. We're going to look at individual players, specifically Pascal Siakam, Dennis Schroder, Scottie Barnes. We're going to see, are they getting better? Because this guy came in with a lot of hype, right? And we were led to believe that we were going to get this beautiful offense, and then suddenly, next thing you know, we're 13-20. And I think that the record can be quite distracting. I think a lot of people would look at a game, and when the shots don't go in and the shots are not going in a lot for the Raptors, if you're not winning games and the shots are not going in and the rookie's not playing, 13th overall pick is not playing, I think it can get kind of frustrating. I think there's also an element of residual resentment that exists in every single thing that we do, right? There's a refractionary period, if you will. We were pretty traumatized as a fan base last year under Nick Nurse, right? We watched the coach run the starters into the ground. We saw prospects wither away on the bench, not develop. We saw our prized rookie of the year have a stagnant year in which he didn't grow. He didn't have the ball enough. And I think a lot of us are still sort of reeling from that. And yeah, I think a lot of what Darko is having to counter in terms of not only what's in his locker room, but also some of the toxicity and bad habits that are in his locker room. I think there's plenty of bad habits to go around. If you're asking me, I think there's plenty of toxicity and bad habits in this fan base. So I thought that it would be a great day, perhaps the greatest day that I could think of to start out the new year with an educational, statistically oriented video. This channel does occasionally when we're not busy, screaming at the clouds about Dennis Schroder. We do occasionally also like to talk about the numbers, because the numbers and they counter the narratives, right? So let's take a look at the head coach of the Toronto Raptors. First of all, this graphic, doing his job. Is he doing his job? Maybe should have been the caption, because a lot of people think he's not. I mean, you would not believe some of the stuff that I hear about him. Hey, Rob, I know your sister knows this guy who knows him, or your sister knows him, or you know this guy. Can you tell him to do this? Or can you, does he know how to coach? Is he an idiot? I've heard him called an idiot more often than perhaps any coach I've ever seen in Toronto. Lenny Wilkins was over it. Kevin O'Neill was psychotic. Jay Triano was overrated, or whatever that was. Sam Mitchell, there was a specific, but I didn't hear Sam Mitchell called stupid. Darko is called an idiot a lot on social media. Some of the memes, I considered piling them all together and just showing you what people say about this guy. And I'm not sure where this resentment comes from. I'm not sure why it happens. I think it's possible because he's just a very blatantly positive person, and that pisses a lot of people off. Positivity, when you're feeling negative, feels disingenuous and somewhat annoying. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. And first of all, come on. Okay, this is where the Raptors were last year. This is where they are this year. I apologize for that first number, pace, on Nick Nurse. That's wrong. But every other number is correct. I looked at it right now and I'm like, whoops, that's wrong. But please ignore that first pace number with Nick Nurse. The pace number with Darko Rajakovic is correct. I just doubled it up. My bad. In terms of the offensive rating, did you get worse? Yes. Defensive rating, did you get worse? Yes. But did your roster get worse? Yes. Dennis Schroder and Fred VanVleet, it's a big fall off. Pascal Siakam, we'll talk about him, but he's been worse this year on certain things, and those things are going to impact both your offense and your defense. Okay? But losing Dennis Schroder, getting Dennis Schroder in place of Fred VanVleet is a massive fall off for anybody. And I think if you really, really consider it, you haven't fallen off that much. But where you have gotten considerably better are the two things that we were expecting to get a lot better at, which were, can we get rid of the selfishness? This was all the talking, all the rage. The Raptors are selfish. They don't pass the ball. Everything's stagnant. Well, guess what? You are 4th in the NBA in assists. You can smile. You can smile at that. You can say, whatever, it's not that big a deal. It is a big deal. A team that was very much one-on-one all the time. You've had a coach who's come in the first 30 games. He's made you 4th without really changing your roster, right? Like what have you really changed in this roster other than Fred VanVleet and Dennis Schroder? You still had Precious Achiuwa, OG Anunoby, Scottie Barnes. You still had most of the same pieces, Jakob Poeltl, but now suddenly you're changing the philosophy and the pace that you're playing with. In terms of 3-point attempts, you lose a really high volume 3-point shooter in Fred VanVleet. This guy regularly took 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 threes in a game. And you start taking more threes as a team because everyone chips in, right? He's changed the shot diet of this team to be far more efficient. And I'll prove it to you. First of all, a little shout out in terms of where Darko has cut his teeth. Here are just a few of the players that would absolutely go on record and say Darko Rajakovic had a huge part in developing them. These are 4 of the players. There are many others. If you want a little bit of a snapshot in terms of how he improves players before we start talking about what he's done for the current Toronto Raptors team, take a look at his one season with Devin Booker. That's a career high. That's a career high true shooting percentage for Devin Booker in the 1 year he had with Darko Rajakovic as an assistant coach. He has absolutely talked about how much work he's done with Devin Booker, and I don't think it's a coincidence that. I mean, look at the true shooting percentage for D-Book in the 4 years prior to Darko Rajakovic. 53.5, 53.1, 56.1, 58.4. And he goes up to 61.8, and no one bats an eye because they're like, hey, man, that's a natural progression. He's getting better. But the 3 years after Darko Rajakovic, 58.7, 57.6, it never quite got to that height, right? It's not alone. Devin Booker is not the only player that this has happened for, this boost in efficiency, because the boost is significant, by the way. 3% true shooting is a massive boost. Consider the infamous or famous Paul George MVP season. This was the best year of Paul George's life, and it's not even close. Okay? Consider the value of a replacement in every year prior to and every year since. This year, this 1 year in Oklahoma City with Darko Rajakovic sticks out like the statistical outlier of statistical outliers. Like, look at the box plus minus in the 3 years prior to. 4.9, 3.1, 2.9. The 1 year with Darko, 7.2. Next year, 4.9, 4.2, 3.7, 2.8. I don't think I've seen a career arc like this. Look at the value of a replacement. 3.4, 3.6, 6.6, 2.5, 2.9. I mean, whoa. It's not all him. But please understand, he was the variable that changed. He had a short stop in OKC, and he did not, he was there for a bit. So yeah, that 1 year where he was there, that happens for your career. And it wasn't just Paul George. Everyone got more efficient. He was working with these guys. Not everyone got more efficient. Obviously, there's always outliers, but I'm saying the star got more efficient, which matters because you got to understand there's a big coaching staff. You devote your development specialist to the guys that you need to pop, right? In this case, you needed to. Darko worked a lot with OG, a lot. if you've seen the practice footage and talked to people who've, maybe entered right after practice, you always see Darko, who's working a lot with OG. He's worked with Dennis. He's worked with Scottie. He's worked with Precious. He's worked with guys who've improved a lot. Consider now, of course, has it continued? Look at Scottie Barnes last year versus this year. Just look at it. And also, consider where he was heading, because honestly, he came into his rookie season like gangbusters. He was incredible in his rookie season. 0.9 box plus minus for a rookie. Wow. But the very next year, 0.4. This year, 6.1. That's a little bit down from where he's been at times this year, 8, 6.5, 7.2. He basically turned him from a starting level player to a superstar in 1 year, one off season. And believe me, I'm not saying that he did it alone. He has a coaching staff. He has Jama here. Jama's huge, right? He has Scottie has his trainer, Brian Macon. He has a huge part in this. But please understand like how he's unlocked him to go from 52% true shooting to 58% true shooting. Suddenly, all of these things that we were talking about make sense, right? Look at Scottie's shooting chart. Now, those red blotches are last year. Look at the left side. That's last year. Right side's this year, okay? Those red blotches are where he is below league average considerably, okay? And the lighter the color of the dot, the more positive in terms of relative to league average it is. Did you see Scottie Barnes becoming a competent three-point shooter this year? Sure. Did you see him becoming one of the best above-the-break three-point shooters on decent volume in the league? I don't think people can understand how bad he was from there last year. Look at the numbers. He went from one of the worst to one of the best from the exact same spots. That's crazy. If you really think about it, that's absolutely insane. Now, is it just Scottie? Is that all he's here for? Consider Dennis Schroder. Houston, LA, Toronto, right? 3 stops. Has he been better here? Box plus minus, negative 4.4, negative 2.9. Suddenly this year, negative 1.2. Value of replacement. He was a negative value replacement player the last 2 years. This year, he is positive. What about true shooting percentage? Has Darko worked his magic on true shooting percentage? Yes, he has. The highest true shooting percentage of those 3 years didn't come with LeBron and AD. It's coming with Pascal and Scottie, apparently. Come on, guys. Like, really understand here. Field goal attempts per 100. He's taking more shots here than he was in Houston and LA. And he's shooting a higher percentage. 3-point percentage, 32.8, 32.9. Oh, suddenly there's a jump, 35.8. Those just an FYI before you lose your mind and say Dennis Schroder is not shooting 22 points per game. Those are per 100 numbers. So the top numbers are his advanced stats. The bottom numbers are his per 100 numbers. Okay. Even as a passer, this would be his best season. Even in terms of steals, this is his best season. And even in terms of limiting turnovers, per 100 possessions in Houston, 4.6 last year with the Lakers, with fewer ball handling duties, by the way, with a much better roster around him, 2.7. This year, 2.6. He makes people better. Look at Dennis' shot chart last year versus this year. He's made him a competent to slightly below average rim finisher from one of the worst last year. Okay, so maybe he's 16th percentile now and he was 4th percentile last year. Do you understand? Like, that's a jump. It's a good thing. He's made him a more efficient shooter from outside. His 3-point percentage has gone up, right? He's pushing him into areas of the court where he's actually dominant in. Look at where Dennis Schroder has come in terms of being a right side of the court mid-range pull-up guy. Like, consider the volume. Now, he's better in those spots. Do you think it's slight tweaks that Darko's making? Or do you think that, hey, man, LeBron James and Anthony Davis and, all the players that are with LA, that team was creating so much more room for Dennis Schroder? This is the Darko effect. Now, one player that, has caught a lot of strays on this channel, frankly, fairly or unfairly. I've been very critical of Pascal Siakam this year, his defense and all that stuff, for sure. But you know, one player who's really, really thriving under Darko Rajakovic that we often don't talk about, Pascal Siakam. Take a look. Here's Pascal Siakam shot chart last year versus this year. Notice a change? There's a lot less mid-range stuff going on. Number one, granted volume, but seriously, he's getting a lot of stuff in the paint. And look, man, he just completely died from above the break. But he's become an efficient corner shooter. 40%, 38% in the corners. Like, I mean, he's totally inverted. Like last year, he was dead in that left corner, in that right corner, and suddenly he can shoot from there. Consider 58.6 2-point percentage. It's the highest since 2018-2019. That's the championship season. 59% true shooting. It's the highest since the championship season. 22.7% three-point attempt rate is the highest since 2020-2021, which means the last 2 years, he was taking fewer threes. Okay? Now consider Pascal Siakam last year versus this year, and just overall value is down. He's been a worse player. But why? What is it that is bad about Pascal Siakam this year and is killing his analytics? Well, number one, it certainly didn't help that he started the season out shooting where he was shooting from. You know, just overall, like his shooting has been down. He's had troubles at the free throw line. He's having trouble. But really, why are the impact metrics killing Siakam this year? How did he go from a 3.5, 3.1 to a 1.3 box plus minus guy? Where is he losing the value? Well, really, a significant amount of the value is being lost on defense. His negative 0.5 defensive box plus minus is a career low. Never in his life has he gotten that. 10.2, the total rebound percentage is a career low. He's never been this bad a rebounder in his life. Even last night, he played 40 minutes and got 5 rebounds. You think that's purely because he's playing with Scottie and Jakob? It's not. His rebounding effort has been missing. 0.4% block percentage is a career low. He started his career out at 4.5. Granted, a lot of rookies are very jumpy and they play not too many minutes, so they're trying to make an impact. But man, if you told me Pascal Siakam comes into this season somehow under 1% block percentage, I would have been shocked. 0.4? Is he one of the worst shot blockers in the NBA? I don't know, but he's definitely one of the worst shot blockers. He is probably the worst shot blocker right now that starts in the NBA. It'd be hard to find someone who's worse. That's significant. He's got a 7'3" wingspan. Like, how? You know what I mean? This is effort. Everything that's down is effort, motor. But it's turning around. Certain things are turning around. Consider Pascal Siakam's December. It is a December to remember. It was his best month of the season. Consider the growth from month to month to month. October, 16 points per game. November, 21 points per game. December, 24.8 points per game. January, granted, 1 game, 36 points per game. Is he about to go on a heater? Is he about to go crazy? He's about to have 30 points per game? He could. Consider all the other elements of the game that matter. Free throw percentage has been going up like clockwork. 71, 74, 76, 83. Up, 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 up. What about that three-point percentage? October, he comes out 28%. He has a hell of a November. 17.9% three-point percentage. We're thinking, oh my God, how did he get so bad? December, he shoots almost league average. 37% from three. His attempts are down, fair. But what if those attempts come up, right? What if those attempts come up a little bit more? He kind of finds his rhythm a little bit. Free throw shooting percentage feeling better, right? Rebounds have been troubling, right? This is an effort thing. Pascal Siakam's defense and the Raptors' defense overall has been on nosedive for much of the month of December. And I expect, having lost OG Anunoby, it's not about to get a lot better. Here's the record ahead for the Toronto Raptors. In terms of strength of schedule for the month of January, they are 15th. They're dead middle, okay? The average opponent they're going to face is around a 500 team, so they're not going to have like the toughest schedule, which is New Orleans, right? New Orleans has been blessed so far with a very easy schedule. And they're not going to have like the easiest schedule, which is what I believe the Chicago Bulls have. If this screen would expand further to the 30th, it would be the Chicago Bulls. They have the easiest schedule remaining for the month of January. So, yeah. So I hope those stats were a little bit illuminating for you guys in terms of understanding what is and what isn't happening for the individual players on this team. I think a lot of people have been justifiably, perhaps unjustifiably, a little bit upset that Grady Dick is not getting minutes. Why is Grady not playing? He's 13th overall pick. Why is he not playing games? And I think when you look at this screen right here, hold on. You see reasons for hope. Those are 4 really incredible shooters, by the way. I mean, Mikal Bridges is not an incredible shooter, but Darko really understands development, man. When he was hired, it was I heard the story actually of how he was hired. They weren't sure he was ready. Someone had messaged the Raptors about Darko Rajakovic. They knew who he was, obviously. And they said he might be looking. He's really good. I'm not sure if he's ready. I'm not sure he wants to do it right now, but consider it because he's really good. For what you need, he's really good. And he's going to be like one of the one-of-ones coming up in the next level. Is it too early for him? Is this one of those things where he took this jump too soon? I don't think so. There's a lot that makes a coach good, right? Now, if you're like most people, you've suffered some amount of trauma in your life, some amount of trauma, coping, etc. Sorry, one sec. Train passing by. And you have experiences with other coaches. The NBA is a fraternity. It's a very, very small group. So when you do something with one player, when you do something with Devin Booker that Devin Booker doesn't like, and it's really out of pocket, like if Devin Booker and you agree that 6 a.m. you're meeting at the gym and you're not there at 5:45, like that's your reputation with the entire organization that just got tarnished because you broke your word, right? If you break a promise to a player, believe me, like everyone on that team will know. If you tell one person one thing and tell another person another thing, if you start trying to play the chess pieces against each other, if you start becoming manipulative and toxic, they'll figure it out. NBA players are incredibly smart. I know that people have this notion that they're not because maybe they're not the most highly educated because a lot of them only have 1 year of college. They kind of pass through high school, whatever. But the thing is that every single NBA player has, or almost every single player has one thing in common. They have been lied to their whole lives. They've had boosters, they've been recruited, they've been told, they've been given tons of promises by AAU coaches and college programs. They've been wooed and sold myths and lies their whole lives. They've been given sob stories by their relatives and, oh my God, I want to start this business, but I can't because I need a kidney transplant and whatever. Oh my God. You got to understand when you aspire and ascend to the level of wealth that these dudes do, people cap all the time. People lie and people always want something from you. And so you become wary, you become guarded and a little bit cagey. You start wondering if your GM and your coach are lying to you, or what's their real plan? What are they really trying to do? What's my agent really trying? Vince Carter went through this very early when his agent, took his money, basically. And it was someone that they trusted. A lot of NBA athletes, they fire their first agent because usually their first agent is the guy that their parents want for them. And then when they get to 21, 22, look at what Luka's going through right now with his mom, right? Like, even parents and grandparents and uncles are not safe. You ever wonder why Kawhi Leonard is just so committed to his Uncle Dennis? Why Kawhi kind of soured on the Spurs organization? Why Kawhi was so great to us? Why was Kawhi so great to Masai? Because Masai kept it straight with him, protected him, kept it 100. And that's the whole point here, right? You keep it fair, and then everyone starts to register that, hey, this guy's not just putting on a front. He's not just telling Malachi he wants to see him smile, and then secretly in coaches' meetings, he's talking shit about Malachi every single day, and he hates him. That'll burn everyone out real quick. You need to build trust, and you need to know what you're talking about. Because these players, they played this game their whole life. They know. Every play, they know. They understand. So teaching a professional basketball player how to be better at their craft, not easy. It's not for me and you. No offense to you, and certainly no offense to me. It'd be very difficult for me to have a conversation with Pascal Siakam and legitimately, A, tell him something that he doesn't already know about his game, and B, get him to believe that I know what the hell I'm talking about. This is not an easy connection to make. NBA players are paid millions and millions of dollars. They have massive egos, as they probably should. And coming in as a first-year head coach is a very precarious situation, especially if you can't create that bond. And that bond is not going to be created overnight. He spent all summer with these players as much as he could. He couldn't connect with Siakam because Siakam was missing from a lot of the team events this summer because there was all the rumors and the trade stuff. Now, there's also the business side of the NBA, which I think a lot of people don't realize, that this is not high school. This is not you got cut because the coach didn't like you. No, this is you got a contract. The coach can't cut you. You got a certain clause. The coach can't bench you. You got to maintain trade value. You know what I mean? I had a coach once in high school where if you missed practice twice, you didn't play. The whole year, that was the deal. You can be sick once. That's it. If you miss 2 games in the NBA, you don't just get benched for the whole season. This is a business. That's the thing. It's a business. So I appreciate one thing about Darko Rajakovic, and I'll tell you a few things that I appreciate about him. Number one, he really knows what he's doing. He really understands the technical elements of basketball. You may not always see it in the synergy of the lineups and whatever, but you know what? I'll tell you why you and I don't see it, or why, it isn't always so obvious. We all have a wishful blinders on, right? My wishful blinders are that Scottie's a point guard right now, that he can handle, 30 pick and rolls every single game. That's my wishful blinders, because that's what I see for him. But objectively, in reality right now, I can see why someone might think he'll struggle with that. I believe that Scottie should be launching threes like he is right now last year. But was his skill work there? Does it really help for him to come out and shoot, 7 threes a game if he's going to shoot 22%, 25%? Or will it just kill the team, kill the confidence, and, disrupt his development? This patience of building things up slowly, it's not always popular with fans. Every fan wants to come out and see a 10-game win streak. They don't want to see the 2-8 growing pains that lead to the 10-game win streak, because the 2-8 growing pains are tough. I think if you're really being honest, you can probably relate this back to your life as well, right? The period before the rainbow, if you want to call it, the parade, the whatever, it's not usually pretty. My life was not pretty. From the age of 12 to 18, it was hell. I worked 50 hours a week sometimes during high school, sometimes 40 hours a week, sometimes 35 hours a week. I was chronically sleep deprived. I had a vision. I had a plan for my life. My life was not fun. It was not fun. It was messy. It was disgusting. My grades slipped, obviously. My guidance counselor said, you have to choose. You can't work and come to school. I chose to do both. I had a plan. My plan was my life's going to be hell for, 6 years. But at the end of it, I'm going to get something out of it. I don't know. Is that crazy? You make people do things like, the Giannis at point guard experiment that everyone talks about with, Jason Kidd. Go back and watch how ugly that was. It was disgusting. He was not a point guard. Even right now, this Victor Wembanyama thing, how many wins do the Spurs have with their truly very generational first overall pick. It's not going super smoothly. The OKC Thunder, they lost a ton of games with Shea before it came to this, right? So I think people really need to see that this vision is much longer than what happened last week, what's going to happen next week. There's so much more to this, and there has to be. And for a coach, there's also the self-preservation element of it. Is the media killing me? Are the players losing faith in me? Am I losing the trust that I have from management? Am I losing my staff? I made a bad call. This lineup that I thought was really going to work, it didn't work. This development plan that I had for this player to improve their three-point shooting has made their three-point shooting worse. Oh my God. Do I have to change everything? All of these things have to be very much, they have to go back to two things. Number one, you have to have confidence in these moments that you know what you're doing. And number two, you have to be willing to change if new information presents itself. It's a very fine line between being rigid and being adaptable. Dennis Schroder drives me insane. Watching him on the basketball court drives me insane. I think it's partially because of his personality. I think his personality drives me insane. Sometimes his shooting form and shooting shot selection drives me insane. But would you believe that he posted a higher box plus minus last night than Emmanuel Quickly? Would you believe that? RJ, like what we don't see on the basketball court and what we do see are so it's so tainted. Okay. I'm curious. Chat, I need your help. In terms of boxes minus, who would you say the Raptors' top player was last night? Just guess. You watched it, right? Jonathan Convoy. Correct. Now, who would you say was the Raptors' worst player last night in terms of boxes minus? I appreciate this so much, man. Thanks. Chuck saying Gary Trent Jr. Nope. Guess again. Scott plays 2K. Correct. Negative 7.6. And Pascal was positive 10.1, I think. The advanced box score was crazy for last night. As a coach, and by the way, Dennis, Pascal, and Scottie were the positives for the whole team. Emmanuel Quickly, IQ or Manny Quick, as he has often been referred to, Manny Quick, was slightly below positive. He was the fourth best player for the Raptors last night. Of course, box defense is not everything. Surely you could say that Thaddeus Young's 2 minutes should not make him as bad as the negative 7.4 that he posted. But it's a good way to verify the eye test. And I think, 5 turnovers for RJ Barrett, some of his defense. I think there's some sense to be made of that. I also think it's not something to panic about. So what makes me hopeful that this roster right now, let me just end this live on this note. What makes me hopeful that Darko Rajakovic is not going to screw up, or that he's the right coach for this franchise, or that, maybe RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, Scottie Barnes, Grady Dick, Christian Coloco, and all the young players on this team that I haven't named in that grouping, that they are going to have the success enjoyed by Cam Johnson and Devin Booker and Mikal Bridges and Desmond Bane. Well, number one, I think, and Gary Trent Jr., of course. Number one, I think they trust him. They saw him fight for and respect the absolute most discarded, most afterthought player on the team. They saw him genuinely care for him. And if you think that people didn't notice that, you're crazy. This is very political, but this is also very, very strategic and very intelligent of Darko Rajakovic. Wow. Thank you so much, Ken. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. Thank you. And Happy New Year, sir, to you. When you consider this group of men, Malachi became a guinea pig. They saw him get better and better and better. I mean, granted, it still didn't amount to much. If you want to know how much of an afterthought Malachi Flynn is, I was listening to the Bill Simmons pod last night, and they said that the Raptors and the Knicks made a classic 2-for-2 trade, trading Precious Achiuwa and OG Anunoby for RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley. And then someone said, what about Malachi Flynn? And Bill Simmons said, I forgot he was even in this trade until you just mentioned it. He is so much of an afterthought. Every head coach that comes in and kisses ass with the star player, right? And they just come in and be like, oh, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes. You know, I'm going to focus on those guys. Assistant coaches, you focus on everybody else. But I think Scottie and Pascal can look at a guy like Darko and say he's giving the same respect to Gary and Precious and Chris and Thad and Garrett and Dennis and Malachi as he is to us. He's not playing favorites here. Even the willingness to bench Dennis, I think that went a long way with me. But you know why I was so cagey about that? Do you know why I was so agitated about that? And I didn't realize it until I really thought about it. It's because I watched a coach for the last 3 years insist on starting a player who was hurting the team. You know, through the NBA playoffs, when the Raptors were about to win a championship, I fully felt that Fred VanVleet was about to cost us that Philly series. He was horrible. He was a net negative every single night. Everything you're watching right now from Jalen McDaniels, like that's Fred VanVleet shooting brick after brick after brick after brick. Thank God for that Kawhi jump shot. But like, man, I'm like sitting there, I'm like, yo. And then it happened again the next year where he runs out this like massively undersized, most undersized backcourt in Raptors history with 2 6-foot guards. And granted, you know, you're a good team and you can sell yourself on it that you're starting your 5 best players. But man, I mean, Tom Thibodeau won't start a 6'2" Emmanuel Quickley with a 6'8", 6'9" wingspan next to Jalen Brunson. And both of these guys are bigger than your biggest guy in that backcourt. And you didn't think that was going to cost you against Boston? Of course it did, but he had to start Fred. And then every year after, I just watched this coach prioritize this player who was a very good player, but he was blind to him. And now everyone draws the parallel. Darko, Dennis, because Dennis came out and he said all this stuff about how he's here for Darko and he loves Darko. Yo, they just traded for Emmanuel Quickley. And believe it, this was in the pipeline the whole way through. This is the deal they were looking for. If it was not going to be this deal, it was going to be a deal for DeJounte or someone like that. Okay? Because if OG was available, DeJounte was available back. If OG would have re-signed with the Hawks. So I look at this and I say, it's not Nick Nurse and Fred VanVleet at all. But because we're so used to that, we're so wired for that. We're so used to a coach who's stubborn with his rotations. And go back and listen to what we were saying about Nick Nurse. I don't think he was stubborn with his rotations. He was inconsistent with his rotations. But he kept playing his starters 40 plus minutes, ran his starters into the ground. Isn't that being stubborn with your rotations? Yeah. It's being very stubborn. It's not allowing guys. We had all sorts of questions about Nick's rotations. We would understand. We wouldn't understand why Jeff Doughton could play such a great game, one game, and then be benched for the next 2 weeks. We wonder that. What are we wondering right now? Why is Otto not playing? Same thing. We are still recovering from the trauma of having Nick Nurse as our coach. But there's also a conditioning that happens when you listen to a guy every single night. We listen to Nick Nurse every single night, come out and, you know, he was pretty smooth. And, you know, when the Raptors didn't play well, he felt heavy. And he was mirroring our frustrations. Yup, you know, Doug, yup. It's not good. Not good. You know, just imagine having an NN hat. He's not coming out and saying like, We have to be patient, guys. We have to be, we have to understand that this is going to be a process, and we're not coming out upbeat. He wasn't coming out upbeat. And when you're frustrated and someone else is upbeat, you think that person's crazy. But I'll tell you something. The energy that he is bringing into every practice is something that every single player is on record saying, this is what we need. And it wasn't going to happen overnight. And you're not going to wipe out all the selfishness or whatever you want to call it from last year. You're not going to wipe out all the bet on yourself and the worrying about the contracts. I'll also say this one thing. Do you know how many players on this team know for sure they're going to be here in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? If Thaddeus Young had to bet right now, how much money do you think he's willing to bet that he's going to be on this roster in a month? How much money would Otto bet that he's going to be on this roster in a month? How much money would Pascal bet that he's going to be on this roster next month? None of these guys know. This is a bus terminal right now. It's very difficult. The position he's been put into, it's almost like they're putting him through the ringer here. Hey, you have this pretty inexperienced coaching staff. Oh, you're going to coach Pascal Siakam, even though you weren't supposed to coach Pascal Siakam because he was supposed to be Atlanta bound, but then his team kiboshed that trade. And then I guess the Raptors have their own part in kiboshing that trade as well. And you're going to try to build this motion offense with a whole bunch of guys who can't really, read the floor. And we're going to force you to play Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa because you need to keep their value up so that we can trade them to the New York Knicks and get this package that we really want. And we need you to implement this entire roster, with a pick and roll between Dennis and Jakob, where one guy can't shoot and the other guy can't shoot. So that one day you can replace Dennis with a guy who can shoot. And we also need you to get Scottie Barnes out of this massive, 1-year slump that he was in last year and rehabilitate that career arc. And we also need you to teach OG Anunoby how to finish the basket, which is something Nick Nurse hasn't ever been able to do. Nick Nurse came out every single night last year and said, yep, we're asking Scottie to take more shots. We want him to be more aggressive. Why did it take till this year for it to happen? Is it just because Fred left? Or is it because the messaging and the connection that Darko has been able to create with Scottie? You just you just watch these two talk. You see a complete difference in his body language. And I think Darko has a lot of things to work on. His rotations, his hyperness. I think these things hopefully will get better with time. But one thing I've noticed is, number one, he's willing to acknowledge when he's wrong, which I really appreciate. I don't think that should be taken for granted. A lot of coaches are very stubborn and they don't know what they don't know, which is why they don't learn. He's a lifelong learner. He's committed to this. He's very different. I've listened to this guy talk in 2016. He seems very different. His philosophy on basketball is just changing. He's constantly trying to surround himself with people who can teach him. And I think maybe players appreciate that too, that he can just, we don't hear the private practices. Obviously, the media is not allowed inside the practices while they're happening. They come in afterwards. So you don't know, while he's running the practices, whether somebody says, hey, Darko, didn't you say this? Now you're wrong about that. You don't know if he says, you know what, you're right, my fault. But I'll almost guarantee you he does, because that just seems consistent with everything else I've heard about him and everything else I've seen from him. And all these pressers that we're seeing from him, he's trying to be authentic. He's trying to keep the message consistent, which is great. I hope that the energy stuff will get better. I hope the lineups will get better. I hope Dennis's role on this team. But, every coach has this security blanket. For Tibbs, it's the point guard prototype, that he's always clung to, and probably Taj Gibson, right? I mean, coaches have tendencies, and hopefully he can learn to trust against his. But I have no doubt, I got to tell you, if this was Nick Nurse right now, if Nick Nurse was the coach of this team and Grady had come out to the start that he's come out to, struggling on defense, struggling with everything, I would be very worried. I would be very worried. I'm not worried. Have you seen me worried even once about Grady Dick since draft night? The day after draft night, let's ignore draft night, my reaction, but the day after draft night, have you seen me worried at all? Have you seen me worried when he had a bad summer league game? No. Have you seen me worried when he, had bad games in the G League? No. I'm not worried. I'm not worried because I trust this guy. I trust him to adjust. I trust him to keep Grady motivated and on track. But most importantly, I trust that he knows what Grady needs to be successful. That he's had success with this player type, that he's had success developing, and that he has success with connecting with guys, that he has this sort of presence of mind of learning how to connect. And maybe even has the humility to know that if there's an assistant coach who's connecting better, then to let him handle it. Seems like everything is just about planning to the future and not worrying so much about the now. And so I empathize with him because he's dealing with a fan base and a media, that is increasingly very, very agitated about the now. All those fire Bobby Webster, fire Masai Ujiri things were not lost on me. You never saw me say fire Masai, fire Bobby. And I think this chat was like, you're protecting management, you're supporting them. I can be critical of the Jakob Poeltl trade without saying these guys are bad at their jobs. They haven't done their jobs very well over the last 2 years, but I cannot ignore who they are and how they think and how rare that is. And I think that they did a very, very good job in hiring this guy because he does a lot of the same stuff that they do, which is they keep the 10-year vision alive in their heads. They understand what they're trying to do. A lot of people, they develop and then somebody else gets credit for it. A lot of people, they screw things up and someone else has to take the blame. I think a lot of what the Raptors are going through right now is because of bad habits that they forged last year. And there's always this residual effect, as I mentioned. When a new coach comes in, they get to reap some of the benefits of the previous coaching regime's development. Nick Nurse didn't develop Joel Embiid. He was hired well into Joel's career. He didn't develop Tyrese Maxey. And had James Harden, not demanded a trade, we wouldn't be seeing this evolution from Tyrese Maxey. We wouldn't. We'd still be seeing the same drama, same heavy energy, and maybe the Sixers would be off to a terrible start. But things line up. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're good. I'm not going to take away from the fact that Nick Nurse has done a lot of good stuff for Joel Embiid in that offense. But he's also taken over for probably the worst coach in the NBA. This is what I mean. Knicks fans are going crazy right now for OG Anunoby. He's also taken over for one of the worst starting small forwards in the NBA in RJ Barrett, right? And he's a very average starting small forward. So when you've been used to the worst starting small forward in the NBA, average is going to feel great. And that's the thing. So overall, what I'd like to say is that I would like for you to really think to yourself today, tomorrow, whenever you have the time, has Darko Rajakovic done a good job? And what is the measuring stick that you're holding him on? If you're holding him on wins and losses, I think you're missing the plot. If you're holding him on development of breaking bad habits, building a new culture, I think you're on the right track. I think that eventually things will get better. I hope for the Raptors' sake that it will happen this year because they don't have their draft pick. But I am almost certain that a day from tomorrow, 1 year from now, on this day, so January 2nd, 2025, I am almost positive that this will go down as one of the better coaching hires in Raptors history. Chuck saying RJ is the worst starting four in the league, starting three. So starting small forward. Yes. He's close. If he's not the worst, then he's bottom three. He puts up a very, let's call it inconsequential 18 to 20 points. I believe at 23, he can get a lot better. It's not average for a 23-year-old. The average starter in the NBA is not 23. The average starter is older than 23. So 23 is still very young. And I believe, once again, if we had traded for RJ Barrett, and just to be completely clear on my take on this, if we had traded for RJ Barrett and we had Nick Nurse here, I would be mortified, truly, truly petrified, mortified, and scared for the future of this franchise that this will become one of the most organizations. Zach Lowe called it a toxic contract. I'm coming out here saying, have hope. Why do I have hope? Because I trust in Jama and Darko to fix, and I trust him to listen. That's it. That's the gap. That's the gap between the previous coaching regime and the current coaching regime. Now, if I have to stop LeBron James for one night, do I trust Nick Nurse over Darko Rajakovic? Hell yes, I do. If I have to draw up a game plan to beat the Atlanta Hawks tomorrow, do I trust Nick Nurse more than Darko Rajakovic? Yes, I do. But if I am trying to build up a player's confidence, change his habits, have a coach who connects with players, have a coach who can really grow players, have a coach who can break through with players, and because it's really difficult to get to coach someone if they don't trust you. I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. If you look back, truly, all those stats that I flashed in the beginning of the development, jumps that players have taken with Darko, go back and really look at Nick Nurse's tenure and tell me which player got materially better year over year. Pascal stagnated. OG stagnated. Fred stagnated. All of these guys came up under Dwayne Casey. I'm not saying Nick Nurse had nothing to do with it. Please understand, I'm not trying to throw the guy under the bus. But find me a player who materially got way better in terms of the analytics, efficiency, in any material way other than volume. Now, Nick Nurse likes to play guys 40 minutes a night. So yeah, one guy might go from 15 points to 22 points because he plays more minutes, takes more shots. But what about the efficiency? The most efficient year of Pascal Siakam's career under Nick Nurse was his first year. Right? Chuck saying, how do you define non-consequential? He played for tips. First of all, thank you so much for the super sticker here. I would love for you to clarify that if you could. Okay, I think I understand. I understand where the comment is coming from. So there's a saying in basketball, empty calories, right? Like how you score your points. So there are some guys who score their points in a very consequential way, right? I'm trying to think of someone who scores their points in a very consequential way. And I think Emmanuel Quickley is a really good example of someone who scores their points in a very consequential way. RJ is the opposite of that for now. He takes high volume, bad shots, doesn't draw a lot of gravity. Teams leave him open a lot. They sag off of him, makes life harder for other players, which is a really big reason why the Knicks ultimately decided to move on from their former number 3 pick. And they decided to bring in a guy who is an average small forward, if not a slightly above average small forward, in OG Anunoby. Is OG Anunoby a top 10 small forward in the NBA? He's cracking that list. He could crack that list. And I think that is exactly why the Knicks made that trade, because they feel that what Emmanuel Quickley can do, they can find it somewhere else. They think. Not what Emmanuel Quickley could be 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, or a year from now, which is a completely different equation. But what IQ did for them this year, they can find a lot of that in Jordan Clarkson if he becomes available. Something like that, right? Jordan Clarkson, I think he just had a triple-double last night. Congrats to Jordan Clarkson. But that's the point. So OG Anunoby was that much of an upgrade over RJ Barrett. Now we took one guy out and put the other guy right into our starting lineup. So we are going to suffer the consequences of that until RJ can break the bad habits that he has. And I think the bad habits are, tunnel vision, as people mentioned. Defensively, he has to get better. Laterally, we need to find a role for him. His finishing has been tough, which is not great, at the NBA level. But look at the incremental increases. Like RJ's not that far, he's not like a terrible player in terms of estimated plus minus. He is, I believe, the 133rd best player in the NBA. Can we get him to 75? Because that justifies the contract. So what would getting him to 75 mean? Let's see. To get him to 75, you would have to make him a above average corner 3-point shooter. The above the break stuff, maybe it'll come next year, maybe it'll never come. But at the very least, get him into the corner, because here's the cool thing. Pascal Siakam is starting to become very, very good from those corners. If RJ can take the other corner and IQ and Scottie have the top covered, well, suddenly you have a very, very decently spaced offense. That's it. That's perfect. RJ Barrett needs to really, really hone in on going right. We need to work on some of the finishing stuff. OG became a better finisher with Darko Rajakovic in less than 2.5 months of work. Can RJ do that? I think he's hungry. Everything he said in his presser makes me very optimistic. Even what Darko said, like, he came up to me, he said, "Coach, what can I do better?" Perfect. If he's willing to listen. And the other thing is, and I do want to end this before an hour, because I know these lives get a little bit long and people complain about it. So I do want to end this live within the next 5 minutes. I just want to say, players talk. They really talk. As much as I said before, the reputation that certain guys, certain assistant coaches develop as like, this guy's really, really bad. Don't mess with him. He'll lie to you. He'll misguide you. He'll screw up your development. Please understand that Stephen Silas is not inspiring a hell of a lot of confidence given his track record in Houston, right? Your reputation precedes you. It's a very, very close-knit community. Everyone knows everyone within 2 degrees of separation. It's almost impossible, right? So when information spreads about somebody being bad at their job or breaking their word to their players constantly or being late or whatever, the same thing can happen in the positive too. And I think so much of development comes back to trust, faith, if you will, trust. If you have the trust that a particular coach really knows what they're talking about, because another player that they really helped, another player that says, this is the guy who changed my jump shot, this is the guy who changed my finishing. He's been doing this for years in the NBA. 3 different stops, right? OKC, Memphis. Wait, 3 different stops. There was another one. Phoenix. OKC, Memphis, Phoenix. So 3 different stops. Imagine all the players he's coached. Imagine all the people that have familiar memories of him. You don't think those people reached out to Scottie Barnes and said, "You got a good one. Trust this guy. He'll guide you right." You don't think those people reached out to Grady Dick? And everyone knows everyone in the NBA, right? Grady Dick has known NBA players since he was in grade 12. You don't think these guys hear it? They hear it. They hear it. Grady, a former McDonald's All-American, top 5, top 10 recruit, whatever he was, Gatorade Player of the Year. This guy is being asked to fundamentally change his game by a man that he does not know. Do you not think ego sets in? Why do you think so many prospects fail? They fail because they don't trust the voice. And they fail because someone can't break through the ego, because they always have people in their lives gassing them up and saying, they're great, they're great, they're great. And then they have a coach saying, you're not shit. And that's why you're not playing. Finessing the needle, threading the needle of this is so important. It's so important that you don't break confidence, break trust before you establish a connection. This thing goes back to it's basketball coaching. Yes, it's a lot of theory. Yes, but it's also on a human level. It's very psychological. You need to understand the best way to connect with people. I think Darko gets it, man. I really do. So I think the Raptor fans, regardless of how much of a bloodbath or how much of a beautiful experience this next road trip is going to be, and the Raptors are on the road for the next 6 games, I believe, and it's a tough one. They come out of this 3-3. I think your season is saved. You come out of this 0-6, your season might be over. You just dug yourself too big a hole. There's a lot on the line. But regardless of how this road trip goes, please understand the vision is much longer than this season or next season. You're building these players up. And now some of them, especially Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, Grady Dick, Christian Coloco potentially, these guys are guys who have long-term futures in this franchise, which means that the work that you put in today in these guys, the 2% incremental improvements that you make today, next summer, 2%, 2%, 2%, The rewards will be reaped later. Whoever taught Pascal Siakam how to drive into the basket, rip through, all the stuff that he does now today that's serving him so well, how he spun from the free throw line, got right to the front of the rim. Whoever taught him how to do that 8 years ago, we're still seeing the fruits of that. The work that Brian did with Scottie, the work that Jama's doing with Scottie to make him more confident, the work that Darko is doing with Scottie to evolve him as a three-point shooter is work that he will take into next summer. And maybe he's going to be the guy to break the Raptors three-point record one day. Could you believe that? Imagine if that happened. Because the way the league is going in terms of more three-point shooting, he might be. He might be the guy who one day hits 15 threes in a game or 12 threes in a game because he just hit 7 the other day. And at that point, we won't think back to the summer of 2023 when he and Brian went through 3-a-days or 2-a-days and just launched thousands of shots. We won't think about that. But that's the work. That's the work. And it builds up and it builds up and it builds up and it doesn't pay off right away and it looks ugly and it misses and whatever. All those clanks and all those misses last year, it's part of a process. All these losses is part of a process. But man, for the first time in a very long time, the Toronto Raptors roster makes sense to me. Now, who am I? I'm a guy on the internet who runs a YouTube channel that I hope is a little bit closer after this live to getting to 7,000 subscribers. I would very much appreciate if you like this video. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to, Chuck here and also Ken. Thank you for your super chats to both of you. And thank you to this community for liking this video, for chilling out in these lives. We had almost 900 people last night in the live. 900 people. I think we peaked at 880. 880 people in the live. As I said, We the North Part 2. We're back. All right. Take care, guys. What a transition. Yes. I'm not known for my transitions, but even I was very proud of that one. All right. Hit the like button, folks. Thank you guys so much. Also, I want to just say one thing. A lot of you reach out to me via Instagram. I don't check my requests folder. Some of these comments that I read today, right before this live, very inspiring. From the heart, very inspiring. A lot of people talking about their kids, a lot of people talking about their spouses. Like, this community is just so much better and bigger than basketball, and I love it. People saying like, man, I'm learning. My kids watch the show. Wow, this is crazy to me. Like, this is so humbling. Thank you to the 315 of you who are in here right now, to the 1,000+ people who are going to watch this later. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great day, and good luck to the Raptors tomorrow. Peace, guys.